This was the front door right in front of me, right here. This tree, I mean, this is a tree now. That was the front lawn. This is all grass, you know? That's amazing how Mother Nature takes over. This is Oakwood Beach, Staten Island. It was a very small community. And this is where my house was, right here. You know, this is where I walked in. This is where I came out. Over there was my driveway. This is where I almost lost my life. Right here, where I'm standing. It was some night.
This is a serious and big storm.
It is all about the search.
There are some waves out there right now that are over 20 feet high.
If you're still able to hear me, we need you to hunker down and get to the highest point possible.
The worst is yet to come.
We will not be able to come and help you until daylight tomorrow.
Pushing that water on shore.
I'm very proud of you, New York. You guys are tough. You bounce back.
Okay.
We've seen many floods, many storms over the years. They kind of have an end point. And this one didn't seem to have that. I mean, it was almost like, and then, and then, and then, right? The story just wouldn't end. It just kept going.
The best way that I can describe it was we were creating a novel that night. It was just one chapter after the next, and we were adding more and more details, and we weren't quite sure what the ending was going to be. And here we are 10 years later.
Much of New York City has been brought to its knees.
This storm literally has crippled the tri-state area. Millions right now without power, and devastation like we have never seen before.
You can take a look at the water actually just pouring over the seawall now as...
We'll be with you throughout the entire night, guys. I'm sure I'll be talking to you come 3 o'clock in the morning. We're going to be here.
The unpredictability of that storm was like nothing I had ever experienced before.
When the chopper went up, we saw an entire shoreline just in total destruction.
You look at those homes, those are real people. Those are our neighbors, right? Those are our viewers. Those are us in those homes or who lost those homes and devastated by that and still haven't recovered to this day.
Well, the day before the storm, I had already sent my family away. I knew it was going to be a problem. There was going to be some flooding. No way in my wildest imagination that it would become what it was.
He's law enforcement, he's military, you know, 9/11 first responder. Like, I worry about him, but I mean, if he says that he's going to be okay, then he's going to be okay.
The night of, it got rough. Me and my brother walked down to the water, and I remember seeing it, how bad it was. It was, the ocean was turning. I mean, it was churning and churning. When I came back up, I remember looking through the window, and I was like, wow, that wind is really rocking, because my car was actually moving, but it was dark. And then I realized my car wasn't moving from the wind, it was actually floating. Out of the corner of my eye, I see my neighbor's house. My neighbor's house was floating, and it was spinning and spinning. And it hit the house. And when it hit the house, it kind of leaned. I knew it was bad. I called my wife. Unfortunately, I didn't get through. But I left her a message.
Basically, it was a goodbye call. You know, tell my kids I love them, I love you so much, I'll talk to you soon. But the talk to you soon didn't sound very confident. It was probably the toughest couple of hours of my whole life.
Those houses were carried by the ocean. The water about 3/4 of a mile away where those telephone poles are, that's where those houses were in their driveways.
The house just came right off the foundation and started moving. We had to get out of the house, so we jumped into the water on top of my dining room table. And that started to sink. So we ended up on that roof out there where those guys are standing.
It was a portion of somebody's roof that we had to float on flowed on to just into this area here from all the way back there.
So when we got out to a certain point, it just stopped. And we couldn't go forward because there was so much debris in front of us. But the problem was houses are starting to float up behind us. And it's now crushing the roof that we were on. And we're just sitting there thinking, you know, what do we do? What do we do? And, I mean, God's will, there was a bunch of 2x12s, big pieces of wood for construction, and they floated up behind us. And I seen them, and I said, you know, let's see if we can get one on top of the debris and climb out. So we climbed out onto the wood, and it held. So I yelled out to my brother, get another one. So he pushed it out to me, and I pushed it forward. And then I climbed on that one, and he climbed forward, and then we both got on the same board. And we did it again. We took the board behind us, and we just kind of leapfrogged. And this was exhausting. We were soaking wet, fully clothed, but we somehow kept on doing it over and over and over. And we ended up in a house on the corner. It was an amazing night. You got to feel the hand of God in that. You really do. You know, you shouldn't survive that. There's 4 fatalities on the next block over. And I was alive. I was alive. I knew I lost everything, but I was alive.
I remember being so worried about the people who were living on Breezy Point as we were getting the initial reports that homes were on fire and surrounded by water. It was just tearing through these neighborhoods.
To say this is a devastating fire would be an understatement. Fortunately, there was no loss of life here. Of course, that is the most important thing, but people lost everything in their lives. They lost their homes, all of their personal belongings. Marie, you came by this morning and your house is gone.
It's gone completely. Everything is gone. There's nothing there. There's nothing there.
Let me ask you, Marie, why did you decide to stay, though?
I bought a generator that was completely installed with the gas and everything and electric, and I thought I could fight the flood, and I probably could have fought the flood, but not the fire. I couldn't afford the fire. I went downstairs to the basement to see what was happening with the generator, and all the windows exploded and the water started shooting up real fast. And I ran upstairs, and by the time I got upstairs, the water got upstairs to the first floor. Then the fire started coming, and we couldn't fight that.
It was really going fast. It was burning really fast, taking one house after the other. And we saw the sparks coming into my living room. You just trying to survive. So you just do the best. I mean, it's either fire or water. You have no choice. So we chose the water, and once we were out, you could smell it. You could smell the burning. I mean, every house was being burned. I mean, the fire was crazy. It was gone. The house was gone. It was just concrete, and the frame, there was just no houses at all. This is when I came to see the house.
Fire officials determined the cause of several massive fires during Sandy. In Breezy Point, floodwaters came into contact with a home's electrical system, sparking a fire that would destroy 126 homes.
One of the things that I treasure the most was that when my husband died in the hospital, I had his clothes, and I don't have anything of him now. I lost everything from him.
What are you hoping to find?
Something I could take with me.
I think I found something.
There's a plate I had in there. The plate that I didn't need.
I saw the plate. It was the only thing that I could see that was still there. I couldn't see everything else was in rubbish, burned. There was nothing else. This is the plate that I found on the bubbles. And this is the plate that the lady sent me. I got a letter from a lady and a package that she sent me the same plate with 4 more and some money And she says, have a good time with your friends and enjoy the wine. And I still have that. I treasure that. I need the tissue.
This was actually found in my front lawn. This was the first thing we found that we recovered from the house. And it was just laying there. It was laying out in the street when the water receded. I found it. I would say this is probably the most important thing that we saved out of it. This is my wedding photos. My wedding video didn't make it through, but my wedding photos, this is something I want to leave to my kids. That's definitely one of my favorites. And the one by the tree. I like the one by the tree, too.
This was a lifetime ago. I didn't know that was...
That was actually, no, that's...
It was your request for leave for us to get married.
That was my request for leave to get married.
There you go, look.
And this is what made it from my room.
That's pretty much the only things that came out of her room that were viable. I think maybe one of them will still actually wind up.
That one right there.
This one?
No, look.
No?
Over here.
It's an incredible sight, to be honest, to see that the ocean has totally, it's basically commandeered the whole beachfront at this point. You turn this way into it, you can feel the breeze, which is upwards of probably 50, 60 miles an hour right now.
The ocean was extremely rough, and you knew it was going to get worse because it was really kind of the beginning of the storm. But to be standing on that boardwalk and then 12 hours later, when we returned to that spot, it's gone. And it's a mangled mess. It was like somebody took the entire Jersey Shore, from the boats to the yachts to the people's homes to the boardwalks. It was like somebody took it all, put it in a blender, put it on high, and then just dumped it out. You know, it's funny, you're covering a storm like this and you forget how much you value and you savor daylight, because at least at that point you had a little bit more perspective. When it was dark and the only lights in all of Spring Lake were the floodlights on our Mobile 2 unit. That was the only thing that could illuminate anything.
If you can see in the distance, it's a little bit difficult. Our lights don't project that far, but that is the ocean waves crashing onto the barrier right on the other side.
I got to admit, it's the first time, professionally speaking, that I was really, really kind of fearful for my life at that one point.
Look at this. This is just the entire root system, the sidewalk, everything brought down.
The most amazing storm I've ever witnessed. I mean, in order for that storm to be the beast that it was, all of these elements had to happen perfectly.
It's going to come, and it's going to come at the worst time with a full moon high tide. So the high tide's, you know, the worst time to have flooding anyway, but now put another 2 feet on top of it, not even counting the storm.
Not to be glib, it was in so many ways the perfect storm.
We are anticipating historic storm surge flooding in downtown Manhattan.
Pressure in this thing is staggering. If it stays at 946 millibars, that would set a record for the lowest pressure ever to hit the... Forecast models did an exceptionally good job with this storm.
3 days out, there was great confidence that Sandy would take this hard left, and it was going to be a major problem for the tri-state area.
Something had to make that storm make this hard left-hand turn and come right into our area. And that was the jet stream.
It's about the turn, and it's made the turn.
It has.
Yeah, so it's north-northwest now, so it's starting to make its move closer to us. So we'll have the stats.
The jet stream on this particular day, at this particular time, folded backwards on itself and actually pushed that storm in our direction, and what happened, happened.
As it makes its journey to the north, you got to remember, still warm. Ocean temperatures in October can be sublime, but they can also be the fuel these things need.
I want to talk about what all that wind has done with the water, and it's all about surge, record storm surge, pushing all that water onshore. Look at this.
At the time it actually made landfall, the National Weather Service was no longer classifying it as a hurricane because it had taken on a different energy form.
It started as a tropical system, and then it took on more of a nor'easter character with stronger winds.
It's the hours of 8 o'clock tonight until midnight. That's when we say, hey, this thing lived up to the expectations for New York City. Because I'll tell you,
sure enough, once that first high tide hit, and I'll never forget Elise Finch being down at the Battery Tunnel, and it looked like the Colorado River.
never seen anything like that in my life. Cars were floating. I remember that one with the blinking lights. And it's just us. We were the only crew there.
So there is a lot going on out here, and unfortunately, very little of it is good.
We drove up and we could hear the water. All right, I didn't really remember that, but you could hear the water. It almost sounded like a waterfall. We got out of the mobile weather lab. I remember we looked and we were like, oh my gosh, what in the world? Because the water was just pouring in. A lot of times, you know, we'll deal with the wind, we'll deal with the rain from a storm, from a hurricane or a tropical storm. We don't always deal with storm surge, especially in a location like, you know, like Lower Manhattan.
Did you notice she was out there and it wasn't pouring rain? She's got this crazy backdrop, but I mean, maybe there was some rainfall, but it wasn't the crazy stuff because that part of the storm was basically done. It was now all about the high tide and the surge.
We have breaking news at NYU Hospital. It's being forced to evacuate tonight after its generator failed. CBS 2's Dick Brennan live on the east side of Manhattan with more on this developing situation.
Well, what happened here was after the area got blacked out, the backup generator failed. Nobody seems to know why, but the hospital had to move fast because patients had to be moved. Wow. I didn't even remember half of that. It all goes by in such a blur. We're at the flooding, and we have to move our truck because if we don't, we might float away. And we're told, wait, you got to go to the hospital. There's a serious incident going on at NYU Langone, maybe an evacuation. That's about all we have. We are seeing something here that not only doesn't happen every day, it happens once in a lifetime, and hopefully only once in a lifetime.
Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Buddy. Here you go. My name's Emily Bolton Blatt, and my son, Kenny III, was evacuated from NYU Langone NICU 10 years ago on Hurricane Sandy. I was about 6.5 months pregnant when they noticed that the blood flow through the umbilical cord was being restricted, and so they declared an emergency C-section. He was born 2.1 pounds, 2 pounds 1 ounce, extremely small, and I didn't have a chance to see him. And he was just rushed straight to the NICU.
Like, I got to glimpse him for a half a second before he was gone. And I said, let me go run upstairs, take a picture. And I brought it back down so that she could finally see her son for the first time. And then the lights go out.
About 8 o'clock, we lost power. And I remember, because I've worked there so many years, I was like, oh, the power will come back on. I've been through this several times. It like bleeps out, and then the backup generator comes. So it did. The power came back on. And then about 5 minutes later, it went out again. That's when we had to start figuring out what the plan was.
We talked and said, well, at least you stay with the baby, so someone's with the baby, whatever's happening. And so he stayed in the NICU with the baby. After that, I didn't know really what was going on because our phones had lost service after texting family back and forth all day long, and then now we couldn't even charge the phones because the power was out.
So I went up from the 8th floor to the 9th floor to the NICU. The nurse noticed me and like, oh, you're little Ken's dad. It's like, yes. It was completely dark. Besides the lights from the machines running on backup battery power, there was no more generator, there was no more power in the hospital.
I think we had 18 babies, Claudia?
Yeah, we had, 18. 20 babies,
yeah.
not that many for us at the time.
All of these pieces of equipment have backups, batteries, but the batteries only have a certain lifespan, like maybe 8 hours, 6 hours.
They've been taking some of these patients down from many floors up, and there's no elevator. So they have to be taken down very carefully, very slowly. There's more than 250 patients that have to be taken out of here, and they are doing it in such a way that it appears the whole thing is going very smoothly.
They put me on one of those like red emergency sleds, and they slid me down after putting a lot of pain medication in me first.
Because there were no elevators, they had to get people down the stairs. And imagine, a lot of these are critically ill people. I mean, people who you wouldn't want to move across the room, let alone carry downstairs, and then multiply that by how many people. Literally, there were hundreds of people in there, many of them critically ill, and then there were also babies.
It looked like an army moving down the steps because she was holding the baby, and then everyone around her was holding the monitors, the pump, the IV fluids, and everybody just stepped down. Yeah, the oxygen, one step at a time. Next step, next step.
That's the stairwell we went down with the babies.
Came down.
We just proceeded down 9 flights of stairs until we got to the bottom floor, and it was completely flooded, just water everywhere. Seeing just a line of ambulances, I don't even know how many there were. There were so many going down the block.
We kind of rode in with these ambulances, and I was just absolutely dumbfounded to see the response. I tried to count, and I stopped at about 50, and then more showed up. So you're probably talking between 50 and 70 ambulances.
I remember when we got into the ambulance, we would go down one street, there were trees down on that street, we had to double back, go down a different street, there were trees down on that, and we kept having to do that until we found like roads that were clear enough to take us to the hospital.
We made our way there, and they emergency rushed him back to the NICU and told me just to sit in the waiting room, where I sat there until the next morning, had no idea what to do and how he was doing, no idea where she was or Emily was, because I couldn't call her.
It was an absolute fact, and it does happen frequently in emergency situations where people are separated and they go to different hospitals. I can't imagine what any mother, any father could have been going through, to be not only just worried about their baby in general, but then to not know. That can be the most terrifying and most difficult thing that anyone could go through.
24 hours later, finally got to see my son for the first time.
The first time our family could be together and enjoy each other. That moment that we could all be together was beautiful.
I want one.
Hopefully you don't jump on it and it gets stuck on your arm or something.
There's a moment we caught on video where we're standing in the wind under a scaffolding, and you could really hear, you know, the wood against the metal structure of the scaffolding banging, and we just thought, you know, we should go inside. It was scary.
This storm drenched us, and it put a lot of people in the dark, too. Lower Manhattan completely without power.
An explosion in Con Ed's East 14th Street plant left Lower Manhattan below 39th Street in the dark. It could be days or even much longer before power is restored to Con Ed's customers in New York City.
We were left to our own devices. We're all the way in this little pocket over here, and we had no power. We're 21 stories in my building. We have tons of seniors, people on fixed income, people who need machines to be able to survive.
There's a lot of people in this area that have medical condition. I am here for my mother. She lives on the 13th floor. She's homebound. She's diabetic.
I'm just going to say for myself, I didn't see a FEMA truck for, it was at least 5 days.
What's it been like living without power since Monday night?
Like hell. It's hard.
Been tough.
Yes, it has. But we got to deal with it. We're New Yorkers. You can't flush toilets. Sinks full of dishes. Becomes a becomes a big problem.
It's interesting. A lot of people think about the after effects of Superstorm Sandy for 2 weeks. But in Lower Manhattan, on the east side and parts of the west side, it wasn't a 2-week conversation. We had power trucks parked for buildings and subway stations closed for months, even as much as years.
Right now we're in Rockaway Park, on Rockaway Beach Boulevard. This is like, you know, the heart of the storm, really. And that's it. Good morning. And my name is Sal Lapizzo. I'm the founder of YANA, which stands for You Are Never Alone. It was a big force during the Hurricane Sandy, the recovery effort. My whole office was brought down to the bone. We filled it up with supplies. We had diapers, toiletries, food. We were feeding 1,000 people a day. This guy is an icon here. What up? Yardell. What's up? So they're doing a documentary on Sandy.
Yeah.
And if anybody knows Sandy, you do and your family.
I was on the 8th step of my parents' front porch, and I watched the water rise up to the 7th. I watched huge pieces of boardwalk just kind of wash by. Actually, here, this is some of it right now.
This is boardwalk from Sandy?
Yeah, this is the original boardwalk. I got a bunch of it. Surreal. Actually, I always call it one of the most awesome things that I've ever witnessed, like in the biblical sense of the word awesome.
Everything was normal. Me and my friend, we were getting a little drunk and everything, and all of a sudden, like, the lights started flickering. We seen ambers coming up the block, and then what happened is a fire started by 113. The whole building burnt to the ground. If it wasn't for this guy, I don't know where I would be, man. Yana helped me build my life back up. Fed me, clothed me, gave me stuff for the house and everything.
There was no military, no police force, nobody. It was all done grassroots. And it turned into what's called Occupy Sandy. And now they're a legend. They really stood up to the name. They occupied the community. They provided a service that nobody was doing. They went into people's houses and gutted their basements and filled them with sheetrock and wood and all of that. They're really great people. But it took a disaster like that to bring the best out of people.
Elon, you remember Sandy?
Sandy? Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, I remember it. Who could forget?
One of my favorite storms.
I'm 5'4". If you looked at an aerial view of Seabright, we have a river on one side and the ocean on the other. So during Sandy, the two waters rose up and came together. I got a phone call at 5:30 in the morning the next day from Seabright's emergency management coordinator. And basically he said, Seabright's gone. And I was like, gone? What do you mean gone? Seabright's gone. And so we got in the car, and it took us a very long time to get here. And I came over the bridge, and all I saw was debris and sand, and it looked like Seabright was gone.
Sandy, for New York metropolitan area, the New Jersey coast, New Jersey wide, was a transformative event. It was the most powerful storm to hit a broad area of this region on record, and we're talking back to colonial times. It was a combination of the size and the power of the storm. Hurricanes can be more powerful, but they tend to hit smaller areas. This storm was a hybrid storm. It was a hurricane that it was beginning to morph into more like a nor'easter. And with that, the size of the storm made it so powerful.
90% of the structures in Seabright took on some kind of water. All of the natural gas line connections snapped off, so there was natural gas leaking everywhere. Our sewer system was wrecked. All the power lines were down. The entire beach, pretty much, had been picked up by the water and dumped in the highway. So there was 8 to 10 feet of sand on Ocean Avenue.
The most horrible thing was the line, where you could visibly see that water line and how high it was. And it was almost offensive. Like somebody was yelling at me. So we called it the FU line. It was quite clear that this was going to be this region's most costly disaster in terms of lives and property in anyone's memory. Just up the coast in Sandy Hook, the tide gauge had blown out. And it had blown out already almost 4 feet above record level.
New Jersey is home. I'm lucky enough to be able to serve here in my home state, family and friends that I care for the community. It still hurts to this day. There's a lot of businesses that didn't recover. There's a lot of buildings that are still damaged. There's visual remnants of the storm that you see as you drive to and from on Sandy Hook. Remembering all of this area growing up as a kid, what it was, how it was. Seeing the hurt and the devastation, all it made us want to do is work harder, get everybody back on their feet. I have ridden the roller coaster at Seaside Heights numerous times, and shortly after the storm, one of the worst feelings was taking a boat down to Cape May from here and driving past it as it was out in the middle of the ocean. It was heartbreaking.
Ocean County. The tree's going to actually like fall through the roof, it looks like, and there's wires hanging down.
I need to report that my father is staying in his beach house and he's being inundated with water.
The houses are it's falling apart. The decks fell apart next to us. I just don't want the whole house to fall down.
Get up on the highest point of your house and stay there until we can get there.
The desperation of people who had to go to their attics, to see those people and to listen to each one of them is very sad.
At this time, we can't get to you. It's physically impossible. We are trying to get something there, but it's not going to be for a while.
People realize that in Ocean County, I believe we had the 2 deaths in our county as a result of the storm, but then shortly thereafter, I think attributed about 11 deaths that were as a result of the storm afterwards. Unfortunately, suicide is something that takes place when people lose everything. And, you know, we had one within a week in Toms River, and then we had one about a month later, and that certainly takes a toll, and it's something that we have to pay attention to.
Whew. I think I got a crash course on disaster response. I mean, I've been a chaplain for some years, and I've done different things, but there was nothing like Sandy.
We're on one of the hardest hit blocks right now of Long Beach, one of the hardest hit blocks in all of Long Island. It's Michigan Street, and this was a street. It's now covered in mountains of sand.
It's like an episode of Twilight Zone. We were watching the water and watching the water, and all of a sudden it sounded like an explosion, and the dunes at the end of the block came shooting down the street like a freight train.
It was just amazing to see how much sand there really is, and how much of the dune is on now our property.
90% of Long Islanders lost power, and were out for more than 2 weeks. People couldn't have heat. People were in the dark and the cold. It was misery for weeks on end.
We have no power. Not only is there no power, but there's no heat. All the boilers and electrical systems are wiped out. The temperature right now is dropping.
It looked like snow. It looked like a blizzard. That's how much sand had come up into the middle of the street, and cars were submerged in sand.
A chunk of like about 8 feet of the boardwalk was sitting right in front of this church, to the point I had to walk over the boardwalk to get into the building. The water line was at about maybe 7 to 8 feet, so the whole entire basement was underwater. So all of our electricity was out, our boiler was out, everything was out. During Sandy, this was completely underwater, so we had to gut this whole area out and rebuild this whole entire area. The building will always be here, but the building means nothing without the people. So we shifted our focus towards the people. And at that point, we began to make an assessment as to who was well, who was not well, who did we hear from, who did we didn't hear from. We started making rounds to the houses.
I say this because I had learned from Katrina about people with disabilities during a storm, that no one comes for you once the winds are, you know, EMS or first responders. I had to write my Social Security number on my own, just in case. The storm is not the disaster. The disaster is after the storm.
People couldn't help but get disheartened by how difficult it became to rebuild. I did multiple stories on the red tape, the hoops that people had to jump through to collect on insurance that took, in some cases, years.
Look, FEMA came, but
All that paperwork was a nightmare. It was so frustrating to be in a traumatic experience, and then I need you to fill out this paperwork.
This is where we learn so much about the fine print on those big packages that you get when you get insurance, and how you need to really read them, because there were so many different caveats to the process. Did the water come in through the door? Did the water come in through the sewer? You would never think that it mattered which way the water came in to determine whether you were covered for flood insurance.
And the scammers, they would come up to you, walk up to your house and say, let me help you, let me help you. And you'd fork over, you know, your checkbook, hand it to the person, you'd never see the person again.
My person that did my house walked away with about $200,000. And I'm one of thousands. And nothing happens to them. Absolutely nothing.
We store some of our canned goods. We have canned chicken, you know, canned beans. And we just try to ensure that we have all the things that, you know, will sustain a family. We give pet food. That was one of the big things that was big during Sandy too. A lot of people couldn't feed their pet animals. So we brought in shipments of pet food as well. So what our church did, we went into our own accounts, and every family that came, we gave them enough money to sustain themselves for a certain amount of time.
Kindness rises. So little pockets of people started to get together, and Shines is one of the oldest bars. It's older than the city of Long Beach. It's over 100 years old. And they were cooking food.
It was like a community center. The pool table was full of food. People would come from everywhere and bring food. There were cases of soda, water, whatever you needed.
My most vivid memory of Sandy happened right here at Shines. Someone walking into the bar holding up a cell phone charger, and she said, I have a charger and I have a car that's running. Who needs a charge? And I needed a charge. Everyone needed a charge.
During that time, I had a paper notarized here. Someone was able to do it.
I think it was a place of refuge. Listen, everybody here in the storm was trying to fix their house, get out of the flood, bleach their house, figure out where they're going to get somebody to put in a new boiler. But they also knew that this would be a place that they could come to, that they could find solace, talk to somebody, just relax for 5 minutes. You know, and if they saw, you know, an extra roll of toilet paper, they could grab it and take it home too with them, because it was okay. It was cool to do that.
The way that people came out to help others, the compassion that was shown, the way that people organized so quickly to get aid to those people that needed it the most was really overwhelming.
There was a lot of heroism coming out of this storm, and for a lot of the people who are stuck, right? No gas, no heat, no food, can't get to the stores, and these people, they could be strangers, they could be neighbors, they're carrying food, supplies, whatever people need.
Well, we've got a message to try and help these people, whoever they are.
How you doing? Coming up is really a hardship for us.
So that's why we stayed up here.
We stayed up here, and we knew it would be a commitment to walk down, because we wouldn't be coming back up.
It is some of the worst that we've ever seen of Mother Nature here in the tri-state area. But I also thought that it brought out the best in the people. There were people who just were driving around from other parts of the tri-state area that weren't impacted, and they were just wanting to help.
WCBS decided to do a blanket drive. I mean, you never think of a blanket as being something that you really treasure, but when you have nothing, a blanket made a big difference.
Channel 2, I want to thank you with the bottom of my heart, because if it wasn't for y'all, we wouldn't have nothing. Thank you.
Right then, you saw and felt the loss that people were experiencing. You were experiencing it as well. And so our reporters did what any normal person would do. You give someone a hug, give them a hand, reach out, help out, try to help them and tell them it'll be okay. And we saw that over and over.
As we think about how far the city has come 10 years after Sandy, we have to recognize the fact that we've come a long way and we still have so far to go. For the rest of our lives, we are going to be playing catch-up with the pace of climate change. There's $5 billion of work that's being done or already been done around New York City, whether it's on the Lower East Side, on Staten Island, in the Rockaways, lots of places. We still have lots of places that are not really much better protected than they were 10 years ago. You look at the Lower East Side, you look at the density of the population, you look at the mix of poverty and middle class. It's obviously a vibrant area that has to be protected, and you look at the fact that you don't have a lot of space for creative solutions there.
Right now we're sitting in one of Lower East Side's like 54 amazing community gardens, and they were once abandoned blocks, and community members just kind of rose up together and established them as community spaces. East River Park, which was the largest green space that this community has. It was nearly 60 acres big, and it had nearly 1,000 mature trees, 326 insect animal species, and right now it's just a lot of dirt and raised ground. You know, if you're looking down at it from the Williamsburg Bridge, it just looks like a construction site.
The construction on East Side Coastal Resilience is moving forward very, very well, and we can't expect resilience to happen without cost, without disruption, without things we like having to change.
They're building flood resiliency, but in order to do that, they took down 1,000 trees. There was huge controversy about the design for flood resiliency. I protested along with a lot of my neighbors.
You see in the background, it's all gone. They cut down 700 trees already. We had tall trees, 80-foot trees. We have no shades now. This monster crane, it doesn't belong here. It's like they've taken everything away from us.
The neighborhood actually began working on a plan after Hurricane Sandy. The community's plan called for preserving as many trees as possible in the East River Park. That's where the target was for this development. The overall plan for Lower Manhattan was called the Big U. It encompassed the area from East River Park, wrapping all the way around Lower Manhattan up through Hudson River Park. And then suddenly, in September 2018, then Mayor de Blasio canceled the entire process and said, no, this plan is not going to work. We're going to institute the city plan.
In terms of the city's response to rethinking our waterfronts and coastal resiliency, I think that it's not forward-thinking enough. It's not very comprehensive. It doesn't address the root causes of the climate crisis in any way. If this is, asphalt or concrete or AstroTurf, how will the park respond to flooding, especially if it's only 8 to 10 feet? 100+ years from now, the sea level is going to rise higher than that. So what are they going to do? Erect it even taller, 10 more feet?
My thing is, I'm sorry it's not what we originally planned, but we still need the resiliency. We still need the flood protection. Because on the north side, past Houston Street, their windows are lower than these.
If this is something that can only get us to 2050 or 2060, I'm going to be there on the front lines arguing, we need something else right now. We need to do the next step. But this is here what we had in front of us. Practically speaking, this was the best deal, and this was a shot. And I'm not going to blow that opportunity.
There's one aspect of resilience, which is how do you keep the water out? There's another, which is how do you make sure that critical services can continue to function even when there might be some flooding?
I never experienced nothing like this in my life. And when I say pitch black, it was pitch black out here. You couldn't see your hand when Sandy came. And forget about heat, because the boilers, all of them got flooded. So you have a bunch of seniors in apartments cold. So that's why they building that building down there, and this won't happen again.
At a high end of sea level rise, by the 2080s, Red Hook will start having flooding every month. Forgetting about Hurricane Sandy, an extreme event that may or may not occur in the coming decades, there's this creeping problem of sea level rise that will lead to chronic flooding eventually unless something's done to keep the water out.
This is like a $500 million price tag. Oh yeah. This is a really big project. Because we're the second biggest development. Red Hook is 47 buildings on the east side and it's 54 buildings on the west side. So picture all them residents. See, it's built up, so this way if a flood comes, it won't affect nothing. If another Sandy comes, we won't be without power, we won't be without water, we won't be without electricity, you know, we won't be without heat.
Elevation is everything when it comes to coastal flooding. Having heating and cooling and electrical at low elevations is a big problem, and so raising those makes a world of difference.
I tell the contractors to put the signs up showing how it's going to be when y'all finish. Give the residents an idea of how it's going to look when you finish. Give them some hope in that. My opinion, it looks bad now, but when it's finished, it's going to be beautiful, and it's going to be safe.
You can look around. I don't see any sort of flood abatement. I mean, it's a joke. They call those flood protectors, I think. I'm not sure what they call them. They're the places where everybody sits when the bus doesn't come. It's, I don't know, an urban accoutrement that made people feel a little bit better that they might have done something.
You need something that's heavy enough to not float when it's in water, and sand weighs more, you know, rock has a higher density than water, so that's a solution. If there's gaps, then they need to be filled. If there's a gap, then they won't do anything.
They put this up after the storm. When they poured the boardwalk, this whole thing was wood. And that's one thing I gotta say that the city did was put some money into this and make this beautiful boardwalk. It was gone. There was nothing here but pilings of concrete, you know? So all this is, what they're doing is filling in, they're putting jetties out. Any sand that they put back, washed away. It continuously just kept washing away. I mean, it's nice. They planted all this vegetation to hold it together, hold the sand together. They put a lot of work into it. I see some improvement. The boardwalk was a big improvement, right? You don't know until it's tested, right? Whether it was done properly or not. The thing of it is, there's no way to get out of here if there's another disaster. So they still only have a one-lane road leaving. If you ever see on the news, you'll see a disaster, and then you see miles of cars lined up trying to get out of the evacuation route. We still don't have an evacuation route. One of my beefs with the government is like, they started handing out these go bags, and you know, it's got everything in it, and when we tell you to evacuate, you grab your go bag and you get out, you know? So that's great if you have a go bag, but what if you're a senior? What if you're an older person? How the hell you get out? You know, you could take your go bag and do what with it?
Hopefully it was a wake-up call for our leaders to know that, you know, our infrastructure needs help, and we need to make sure that it's equipped to withstand modern weather events.
I think the question now is, have we learned and have we retrofitted and have we done all the things that we said we would? And I don't think the answer is yes.
New York City is vulnerable. We have more than 500 miles of coastline. We have lots of people living in a dense urban environment. When it floods here, people get hurt.
One of the post-storm policy changes is the Hurricane Center now would keep the hurricane watches and warnings up, even once it lost hurricane status, as long as it might have an impact on lives or property along the coast.
We have to take resilience seriously, and New Yorkers individually have to be aware. They have to know where they're going to go if they have to evacuate. They have to think about flood insurance.
If the authorities are suggesting evacuation, there shouldn't even be a question. Shouldn't even be a question. Get out of Dodge.
There's not one solution that works for climate change, and I think we've seen that. There's a lot of differing conversations of what's going to work best in each neighborhood, but what we do need is resiliency, and we need a plan now.
We have some temporary ideas right now, but we're not there yet, and you hate to think about the next time.
You asked me about dealing with the riverside of Seabright and making us storm prepared. Fixing this stuff is what I'm talking about. Until we get a complete bulkhead, it kind of defeats the purpose.
It's a cost-benefit analysis in some respects. How much can we afford to spend to keep the next Sandy at bay? I mean, to keep the water out of Seabright, are you going to raise the island here? Are you going to build a seawall 2-3 times higher? Or are you going to just be prepared?
When you choose to live here, you have to know that the water can get you. If there's one thing that you can bet on, whatever you can do to the water's got a mind of its own. You can massage it, you can divert it, but eventually the water wins.
I loved Breezy when it was the bungalows. When I moved here, it was just a bungalow. When we walked down the walk, a 5-minute walk used to take half an hour because we would stop and say hello to everybody. Everybody would be sitting in the deck. There was no air condition. Now everybody has air condition, so everybody's inside. You can make a picture of it.
This was when it was the bungalow.
All of us went through a lot of trouble, a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. Every single one of us to build these beautiful houses now. But I couldn't handle it, so I said, if I don't move out of here, if I don't leave this house, I'm gonna go crazy or something. Even though I sold my house, I come to Breezy and I feel like home. This is my home. I lived here longer than in any other place. My friends are here. We all been through the same thing. All my friends have an open door for me, all of them here. I feel good when I'm with them.
Me, Mom, and Dad. I think I was about like 4 or 5. Me and my sister were when they were born. I was reading a book to her. The very hungry dad hour.
We've been calling him since he came home. This is our stormtrooper. He survived the storm.
Here, I have a few things. But I caught most of the Pokemon.
I feel like we really worked very well that night. There was absolutely no panic. There was no chaos. Everything was very quietly done. People, I think, are looking for that story, right? Oh my God, pandemonium. That never happened.
No.
Everyone was really just doing what we were supposed to be doing.
I just process it with gratefulness, even though it was a very crazy and dramatic beginning of his life and our lives together as a family. Just process it in hindsight that everything worked out.
Like, basically, they saved my son's life.
In the front here, I had cobblestones all along the front. I did it myself. And like I could see once in a while, you could kind of make out where they were. But like even the grass has grown over the blacktop, so you can't even see really where the curb was anymore. I'll be honest, every time I come back, yeah, it's heartbreaking to me. It really is. You know, I have a house now. It's a beautiful home. You know, it's in a beautiful neighborhood. I enjoy the house. I don't say I love the house, you know, but this house, I built this house from a little summer bungalow to what I felt was a mansion to me. And I loved it here. I absolutely loved it here. You know, if it wasn't for this buyout, I absolutely would have been bankrupt. I would have never owned a home again. This buyout saved hundreds of people's lives. We did not have the money to rebuild. We would not have had the money to rebuild. We had insurance, but it wasn't enough. They were literally throwing this in the garbage. And I seen it in the garbage and I said, you know something, that can't go in the garbage. I was like, there's only 1 Kissam Avenue, there's only 1 sign for Kissam Avenue. That was only 1 block, you know, and that was the only sign for it. And they threw it out. I picked it up, and I had it ever since.
What would it have been if we stayed on Kissam Avenue? I think it would have been great. I think it would have been absolutely great. But you know what? We're very lucky.
We're very lucky. I'm here.
We have each other.
We have a
He's
family.
here. We have our family. Our kids are great, and we have the memories. We had it for a short period of time, and then it was gone. But we're here, right? So it's what it is. I'll take it.
Sandy was a tremendous storm, but then after that we had other storms, and when I sit down and watch TV and I see these things, my heart goes out to them now, because I've been through it. I've been through Sandy, I've been through a quadruple bypass, I moved 3 houses around, and I'm still here, so I guess God doesn't want me yet.